Hey, how's it going? Today I'm going to introduce you to matter.js, which is a rigid body 2D physics system in JavaScript for the web. This example is going to be done in Webflow. We're just going to build this simple system that when you click this button, add a pepper, it adds peppers into the environment. Now, matter.js can do so many things. If you just go through the examples on their website, you can tell there's a ton of fun things you can do to add a little bit of spice to your website. On this one, we'll be able to also drag and throw things around, so that'll be fun. Okay, let's hop into Webflow and see how I built out the scaffolding of the project. Okay, the main thing to know is that I have this HTML embed. This inside has a canvas tag, and I give it a class of canvas class and an ID of canvas target. This will be important for our code later. The class of canvas class is this div right here. I just put it inside of this class controls hide and then hide that because I don't want this to actually display, but I want the canvas to actually use the CSS styles from this class. So I just give it position absolute and then a width of 100% and a height of 100%. Since it has position absolute, the parent of the HTML embed, which is this wrapper, is set to position relative. I gave it a min height of 100 VH because I want it to take up the entire screen here. Last, we have this image. I have the embed. And then I don't think I need to show you anything else here except for the page settings. If we click the gear icon, you can see that I'm loading the matter.js library from CDN. And then I'm also loading code sandbox script here. I'll just get rid of that slash there. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through the code as if you've never seen matter.js before. So anytime I'm getting started with a new project, I like to go to their getting started guide and just copy the boilerplate code that they have here. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste this into our code sandbox file. I'm going to rename a couple things as we go, like var. This is kind of old school, so we'll change these to let for now. Okay, so we're just going to define some module aliases, and this is pulling off the matter object. We're getting the engine, a renderer object, runner, bodies, and composites. These modules will just be used throughout the project. And then I have engine.create. Here we're creating our physics engine. And then we're also creating a renderer. This is going to render things onto the canvas. So it takes this element document.body. One thing I like to do with matter.js is rather than the element, I want to pass the canvas that we made. So one of the properties you can specify is canvas. And here I'm just going to say canvas. Now this doesn't actually exist, so we need to define this. Let's go back to the top of our project and say const canvas. Const canvas equals document dot query selector. And then in here, we'll put that ID of canvas target that we had from our Webflow file. So I'm going to go ahead and just save. And where were we? So we defined our canvas, and then the engine is the engine. So this is fine. Our renderer is good. Now, by default, matter.js is going to create two boxes in a ground and just spawn these. The way this works is bodies.rectangle. So we're building a rectangle. This is the X position. This is the Y position. And then these are the sizes. So 80 pixels by 80 pixels. This will be fine for now, but we'll work on this in a minute. And then we're also creating a ground. This is going to be at the bottom of the viewport and setting is static to true because we don't want this to actually move around on the page. Now we're going to call composite.add function. And what we're doing here is we're adding all of the bodies to the world in an array. So this is an array, and we're giving the array box A, box B, and ground. And then we're putting those inside engine.world. And then matter.js needs to call the run function on the render object. And that is getting past this render object that we created up here. And then we create the runner. And then we run the engine. So let's go ahead and save and see what we get. And we're going to refresh. And you can see we get two boxes with these wireframes. It's pretty ugly, but it's good to know that we can actually get started here. So I'm going to start modifying the code so that we can have something that is a little more fun. Now, the first thing we're going to do is edit the options of our renderer. And some of the options we can give it are a background color. In this case, we're going to give it transparent. And also these wireframes, we can make them not be wireframes. So we'll pass this false and save. And then if I refresh, now we see we get something that's a little more pleasant to look at. I think it'd be fun to be able to do some sort of interaction on this with the mouse first. So I'll go ahead and put that in now. So to do that, up here in our modules, we're going to need to load mouse into mouse constraint. So let's remove that semicolon, add a comma, and we'll say mouse equals matter.mouse, and mouse constraint equals matter.mouse constraint. and save that. And then down at the bottom of the file here, I have some more boilerplate code that I got from the demos. So I'm just going to copy paste that in. First, we're going to create this variable called mouse, and it's going to create an instance of mouse on render.canvas. Next, we're going to create a mouse constraint, and this uses the mouse constraint object to create a new mouse constraint. We're going to pass it the engine, and then also we're going to pass it the mouse variable that we just made and add some constraints to the stiffness. We're also not going to render anything on mouse click, so that's just going to stay visible false. Lastly, we need to add this mouse constraint to our world. So we're going to, on the composite module, we're going to call the add function, and we're going to add that mouse constraint to engine.world. Let's save and see if we can click around. So I've refreshed, and now I can drag these boxes around, and that's pretty fun. You can toss them away, and they're gone forever. But if you refresh, they come right back. All right, let's create a function now so that when we click this button, we get more boxes to appear. In the Webflow file, you'll notice on the button, I've created an ID called add button. So that's how we're going to access this within our code. I'm going to come back to the top and say const add button equals document.query selector. And in here, I'll put the ID of add button. Now we want to add an event listener to that. So down here, I'm going to say add button dot add event listener. And I want to add the event of click. And I'm going to pass something like create object. Now I need to define, this is a function right here that I need to define. So we'll go ahead and define it right above. Create object equals a function. And rather than create the boxes up here and pass them into the world, I'll do that within the create object function. So I'm actually going to move this up. And we'll just take this one and we'll just call it box. And we can delete this one. And we're not creating boxes, so we're just creating the ground here. And within create object, we're going to call this add function on composite engine.world, but we're not passing all of these. Now we're just going to pass the individual box. So we'll call it box like that. And since these don't exist anymore, we'll have to delete these. So now when we reload the page, nothing's loaded, but that's expected because we got rid of those box A and box B. But if I click add pepper, then now I'm building boxes. And that's pretty fun. And I can grab these and chuck them around. Okay, you might have noticed that as we spawn boxes, they're kind of spawning from this point right here. And the reason that's happening is because the Y position from the code that we copied is at a position of 200. So if we change this to just something like 0 and save, we should see it spawn at the top of the screen now. That's much better. Okay, really the last thing that we're going to do is just add a little bit of branding. I love the pepper emoji for some strange reason, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Now, the way we can do that is just in our Webflow project here. I've already added the pepper PNG. I'm going to use this this one here. It's 80 by 80. The sizing of this will matter, so that's something to take into account. We'll go ahead and open that, and then copy the link to this. And I'm not going to use this anymore. What I want to do is I want to say let box equal bodies dot circle. And circle takes a couple parameters here. The first is the X position, which will be 450, which is basically close to the middle of the screen as far as I have it. Y position of 0, a radius. I'll give it a radius of 40 pixels, and then some options. So first, we're going to give some render options. And the first thing we can do is we want this to render as a sprite, not as like a color or anything like that. So sprite, let's spell that correctly. This is another property that takes another object, and this takes a texture, and that texture is going to get the link to our actual image. So I'll go ahead and save that. And I wrote boats here, but I mean bodies. So let's go ahead and refresh and see if we get peppers now. And now we get peppers. And we can drag these and punt them around. Okay, something else we want to fix is that you'll notice these peppers look kind of stretched and actually pretty ugly and blurry. And the reason this is happening is because if I open an inspector and look at our canvas, matter.js actually sets a width and a height of 800 to 600 on that canvas element. And we want that to stretch the whole screen, right? So we can get around that by specifying that within the options when we create the renderer. To do that, just go back to the code here, and within the options of the renderer, we'll add two more properties, one for width, and we'll set this to window.inner width, and one for height. was set to window dot inner height. And if we save that and refresh, okay, the canvas is good, but you see we've still got the ground isn't taking up the whole space, so we need to um, refactor everything else as well. So now on the ground, rather than hard coding these values, we're going to set the width. This is the, let's see, if I go to the matter.bodies.rectangle, we have the x position, the y position, width, and height. So we'll do the x position. We want that to be right in the middle is where the rectangle will spawn. So we'll say window.inner width divide by 2. And for the height, we just want that to be window.inner height. And then for the total width, we want that to be just window.inner width. So we'll put that there. And then we'll leave the height at 60 for now. And now when we refresh, we should see the ground show up back at the bottom here. And we can add peppers. But it's all spawning from right here. So let's move that back to the middle. And we'll do that just by changing this 450 to window.inner width divide by 2. And save and refresh. And now it's going to spawn in the middle. One thing that I'm not going to get to in this demo, but we can go over later, is when we resize the window, it's going to squish. So we might want to resize the canvas as we're resizing the window, right? But that'll be a topic for a later course. All right. Hope you found that enjoyable. Bye.